Okay, there we go. Okay, we are picking up now. Revelation chapter 7 is our focus. Today, we're going to focus on verses 1 to 8. Before we do that, we want to go back a couple chapters. So this is closing out or wrapping up this section on the seals. Remember the whole layout of Revelation, the vision of Christ, which establishes his character and sovereignty and many of these elements of his just absolute control and love for his people. And then he has the letters to the churches in 2 and 3, addressing their immediate concerns and struggles and trials. And that's going to set the tone for all that follows as well. And then we get to chapter 4, and we have another vision now of the throne in heaven. And just can you remember the characters we were working with in that scene? So John looks, and behold, he sees an open door in heaven. And when he goes, what does he see? If you remember, chapter 4. Well, we'll start with the throne.
Yep.
There's one seat on a throne.
Yep.
And he says, around the throne, there are a selection of characters here. Remember what they were?
They were the martyrs.
Elders.
Yeah,
martyrs.
the 24
Oh.
elders that were around the throne.
The four cherubim.
Yeah.
And the 4, he refers to them as living creatures, which would be the cherubim or the seraphim, the guardians, right? And very similar to Isaiah's vision as they cry out, holy, holy, holy. And we did talk a little bit about what was the difference between John's. So Isaiah has this vision of God on a throne with the seraphim crying out, holy, holy, holy. What was the difference between that vision and John's vision of something that looks almost identical, except there's some key differences? You remember?
In
Raymond.
Ezekiel, it was I'm trying to say it. Well, I know in this one, it's a positive, where it was negative in Ezekiel.
Yes, exactly right. In Isaiah's vision, it's terrifying for Isaiah, and he cries out, woe to me, I am a man of unclean lips. John doesn't cry out that way, does he? He rather, because there is one element in John's vision that Isaiah did not have in particular, which is in chapter 5. Who appears in John's vision that Isaiah did not see?
Lamb.
Yeah, the lamb, right? John is, now we have this opening of the seal, the scroll with 7 seals on it, which is the unfolding of God's promise of deliverance and judgment when he's going to make everything right, which is what we're longing for. And so there's that seal, sealed up. There's a scroll waiting for God to open it up, to read it, and to declare justice and an end to all the craziness that's happening in the world. And no one is worthy to open it, if you remember, and John is weeping because no one in all creation, in heaven or earth, can open it. And what's really interesting, and we're going to come back to this phrase again, because he's going to use this device in our version today. The elder says to him in chapter 5, verse 5, weep no more, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has conquered so that he can open the scroll. And then, so he hears him say this to him. And then he looks, and what does he see?
A lamb.
A lamb. So he hears the Lion of the tribe of Judah has come, but when he looks, he sees something different. He sees the lamb that was slain. And there's going to be a few times where you'll have this happen, where John will hear something, and then when he looks to see what he has just heard, it's something unexpected, something completely different, but it's the same thing. The lion is the lamb, and the one who conquers with strength and power. He conquers not by slaughtering people, but by laying down his life for them to redeem us. And he's the one worthy to take the scroll. Without that, without the Lamb taking our sin away, we all cry out like Isaiah, woe to us. We have no hope here. We're in the Holy of Holies and we have no business here and we are doomed. But with Christ now, we can sing it's a song of praise. Now, worthy is the Lamb and blessing and honor. And then he begins to yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Pastor, in 5:6,
Yeah, please.
it talks about, where is it? Basically that the Spirit is sent to the earth.
Yeah.
But in 4:5, it says that the lampstands, the 7 lamps of fire, was the 7 spirits. So,
Which are the 7 spirits, yes,
which represents the Holy Spirit, correct?
correct. That's
So the
correct.
Holy Spirit is there with God in the throne, and then
Yeah.
he's also sent out to the earth. So is that just saying that he's everywhere?
I think that would be correct. Where can we go from your spirit, oh Lord, right? That is further confirmation. Thanks for bringing that up, Jack. That's further confirmation of the deity of the Holy Spirit, that he is God. Only God can be everywhere all at once. So he can be around the throne and sent out to the ends of the earth to gather God's people. So that's where we left off. And then we got into the seals. All right, quick quiz for you here. The first 4 seals are opened and we have what are called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Can you remember the color order of these here? What were the
White
colors?
was first.
White was first, right?
Red was second.
Red was second,
Black,
Black is
black,
third.
and then
Pale.
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 And you remember these 4 horsemen were from Zechariah, the ones that he saw. These were the ones patrolling the earth, who in Zechariah's vision are going around the earth, and but they're spiritual beings, so to say, who are observing everything. They're going and patrolling the earth and seeing how things are, and they come back reporting that everything's at peace, everything's fine. I mean, but that's not a good report, because God's people are not fine. They are suffering. They're being oppressed, and all the world is just at ease. And it's from that report that Zechariah's vision, the Lord basically sends out once again those horsemen to just cause chaos, to bring war, and to unsettle things. And that's what's happening here. Is the world, as John is dealing with this, is at peace in a sense, because Rome rules the world. It's an oppressive peace. God's people are suffering, but business as usual for everyone else, and no one cares. And so you have the Roman Empire doing their business, ruling and reigning supreme. And God says it's time. And the first thing he does is begin to disrupt. And how does he do it? The white horse comes, and what does he do?
The conqueror.
Yeah, he's the conquering of white, and he causes there to now be sort of a discontent among the nations as they seek to sort of conquer one another, now starting to rise up against each other. And he came out conquering to conquer. And so you have this threat in the Roman Empire at that time. You begin to start having this emergence of the barbarians and these tribes outside of the empire seeking to break in. And within the empire too, you're having trouble. And then he opens the second seal, and it was red.
Red.
That quest for conquering leads to what?
To take peace from the earth.
Yeah, takes peace from the earth. And that when you take peace away, what do people do?
Slay, hurt one another.
They hate one another, right? They slaughter each other. And then from there you have the black, which was symbolic of what? You remember? The third one.
Famine.
That's
Famine.
famine, yeah.
Famine.
It's the suffering of the whole land because of this. It's not just soldiers that are suffering, it's now everyone. And then you have the famine, and then the pale horse, which brings it to a
Death.
horrible conclusion of death, pestilence, famine, wild beasts. You know, this really has a feeling of like what World War I was like. World War One, I don't know if you know that, but when it began, everyone was excited to go to war.
Yeah,
Mm,
Everyone thought it was going to be an easy win for them.
you meant, yeah.
They had no idea what they were about to get into. And so they're having parades and they're sending people off to fight and to conquer, to do as they, to stand for their alliances. And then they get bogged down and all the things that it just follows exactly here. After that joyful pursuit of conquest, it ends in just slaughter. And then from there comes all kinds of famine and sufferings, the economies, and then just disease. As you remember, the conclusion of World War I was the Spanish flu. Just the kind of disease and pestilence that comes. It's a classic scene that will be played over again and again. So, but it's God hasn't even done anything just yet. This is just stirring the pot and troubling the world so that people are doing this to each other. And now it leads to the next seal, which was that question. What was the question posed when he opens the fifth seal, and who asked the question?
How much longer?
Ask how
Yeah.
long?
How long? Who's saying that, Rob?
People who have lost their lives,
Mhm.
testifying to Christ.
The martyrs,
All the martyrs,
Martyrs.
right? Those martyrs, they're under the altar. Do you remember the significance of that being under the altar?
they were waiting for their, to be revenged.
Yeah, they're waiting for their vindication, but
Covered by
remember
the
the
blood.
whole thing of what was under the altar.
Blood.
That was the blood of the sacrifices would pour under the altar, and so they were presented as sacrifices, and now they're waiting for their vindication. How long, O Lord? And he tells them to rest a little while, until their number of their brothers who will die like them has been finished. And then he opens the sixth seal. And that's a pretty terrifying scene. It's all a setup. You can feel nothing really happens just yet in the sixth seal. It's just this dramatic pause. It's like the music in Jaws, the dun 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 dun, right? Just that terrifying now waiting of what's going to happen next. The sky rolls back, the stars fall, the moon turns to blood, there's an earthquake, and everyone is terrified from the greatest to the least. And they realize that the wrath of the Lamb has come. It's now beginning. And now we move to chapter 7. So that's where we left off, with that scene of tension here, waiting now for what is going to happen. What is Christ going to do? What is the Lamb going to do to avenge his people? That's what this is about. As I stressed many times, God's judgment and revelation is not of a referee, of an objective player here. It is vengeance against those who have harmed those that he loves, is what it is. It's very personal. And we're going to see that in the next chapter. So let's pick it up there. And Liz, would you start us off here and just maybe read verses 1 to 8, just the whole passage to get us started?
Certainly. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on earth or sea or against any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm earth and seas, saying, "Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads." And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. 12,000 from the tribe of Judah were sealed, 12,000 of Reuben, 12,000 from the tribe of Gad, 12,000 from the tribe of Asher, 12,000 from the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 from the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 from the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 from the tribe of Levi, 12,000 from the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 from the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 from the tribe of Joseph, 12,000 from the tribe of Benjamin were sealed.
Okay. All right. This is one of the famous passages that gets really misinterpreted often. the 144,000. What is this about? So let's break it down verse by verse and see what we can find here. So verse 1 sets up the scene now. So we've just left off with the whole world in terror as they're waiting for the next round of judgments to fall upon them. But before they fall, there's a pause now, and something very important must take place. So let's talk about what that is. So what does he see now in this next vision? What does John see in verse 1?
4 angels.
He sees 4 angels.
Four corners of the earth holding the 4 winds of the earth that had no wind blow on the earth or sea or against any tree.
Yes. So you'll notice the number 4 appears 3 times here. What was remember the meaning of the number 4?
All the earth.
Yes.
Four corners of the earth.
It's referring to all of creation, all the earth, the 4 corners, the 4 compasses. And so this is, you see these 4 angels who've been set forward now, and they're stationed in every direction. So it's like just like a room with 4 walls. They're each at their station, surrounding everything. And what are they doing as they're standing at each corner of the earth?
Holding back the winds.
Yeah, they're holding back the 4 winds of the earth. So they're the winds. If they weren't there, the winds would be blowing, correct? But now they're holding it back. And so we want to talk about what it means, the 4 winds of the earth. So before we discuss that, let's take a look at a few passages here. And I'm going to start with Jeremiah 49, 34 to 38. I'm pulling it up here. And here we have a reference to 4 winds from the 4 quarters, and see what that's a reference to here. So Roy, would you read that for us?
34 through 39.
Yes, please.
The word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet concerning Elam in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. Thus says the Lord of hosts, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might, and I will bring upon Elam the 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven, and I will scatter them to all those winds, and there shall be no nation to which those driven out of Elam shall not come. I will terrify Elam before their enemies and before those who seek their life. I will bring disaster upon them, my fierce anger, declares the Lord. I will send the sword after them until I have consumed them, and I will set my throne in Elam and destroy their king and officials, declares the Lord. But in the latter days, I will restore the fortunes of Elam, declares the Lord.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to think what Elam is, but
2.
someone have a note on that one here? I think there's some foreign nation. It's not
Right.
it's not Israel.
This is
But-
Jeremiah, right?
This isn't Jeremiah. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it real quick, if I have a note on that.
I've got one that says it's an important power to the east of Babylon,
Okay,
subjugated by Assyria.
okay, that's great. So it's out east there, and they are probably joining with Babylon too. And but what does the 4 winds mean for Elam? He talks about the 4 winds from the 4 quarters, exactly the way that John talks about it, that the angels are holding back the 4 winds from the 4 corners. What do the 4 winds represent here in this passage to Elam?
Overwhelming
God's
disaster.
judgment.
Yeah, this is God's judgment upon them. Is the winds come in are, and basically he's going to scatter them to the winds here. He's going to blow them away. I guess we would refer it that way. There's another reference to this as well, Ezekiel 37. Let's turn there. 7 to 10. Diane, would you read that for us?
Sure. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a sound, and behold, a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to its bone. And I looked, and behold, there were sinews on them, and flesh had come upon them, and skin had covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophecy, son of man, and say to the breath, thus says the Lord God, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived and stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army.
So now we have wind here, the four winds coming, he
Mm.
mentions, but what are they doing here?
Bringing
Giving
to
life.
life,
Yeah,
bringing
they're
to
bringing,
life these
they're
bones.
bringing life. They're bringing an army back to life here.
Mm.
So in Jeremiah's vision, the four winds come to bring destruction. In this one, the winds coming to bring life. Let's look at a couple more passages and see what we've got here. Daniel 7, 1 to 3. And Raymond, would you read this one for us here?
In the first year of Belshazzar,
Chaza.
Belshazzar.
king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up a great sea. And the four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another.
Okay, in this vision now, what are the winds doing?
They're
Stirring up-
creating
Yeah.
disruption in the ocean.
Yeah, they're creating great disruption and stirring up the great sea, which we'll find out is the place of chaos, of evil, and this is what's going to bring forth these four great beasts that are going to come out, which are representative of the four empires that Daniel has been prophesying about. So it's very interesting. Again, the four winds stirring things up here. Zechariah 2:6 is one last one we'll look at here. And then I'll have a few other thoughts before we continue. Zechariah 2:6, and let's see, Claudette, would you read that for us?
Whoops. Up, up, flee from the land of the north, declares the Lord. For I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heavens, declares the Lord.
Okay, all right. So I have two other passages for you to consider. Where in the New Testament do you see like wind really doing something dramatic?
Acts.
And when
Jesus.
Jesus was in the
Jesus.
boat sleeping, and his disciples of a storm came up on the Sea of Galilee,
Mhm.
and they became terrified and woke him and asked him, to
Yeah.
calm.
We see the man commanding the winds, absolutely, and
Mm.
calming the winds. You mentioned also Acts. What happened there in Acts?
Pentecost.
At Pentecost,
Yeah.
right? A sound of a mighty wind moving. There's another one that we miss sometimes. I want to show it to you here. In Genesis 3, after Adam and Eve sinned, and it says that after they sinned, they heard, verse 8, they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. You remember that?
Yeah,
Mm.
Mhm.
And that's where I really think we missed it, because if you notice, there's a little footnote to cool. The actual Hebrew is
Wind.
in the wind of the day. In fact, my Hebrew professor says we may have gotten day wrong too, because the word day is very similar to the word storm, and in Hebrew that it would have.
Hmm.
He thinks it's the wind of the storm. Could be, but I think the wind is absolutely correct, and that this is a moment of it's judgment, it's action, it's God is going to do something, doing something dramatic, depending on the context. It might be a case where, like in Acts, where the church is about to be born, and God's people are about to be empowered to be his witnesses. And so he sends a mighty wind to do this. Or it might be like in Jeremiah, where the wind is coming to destroy a nation, or the wind is coming to stir up the waters, but something dramatic is happening here. In our context in Revelation 7, what's your thought about what the wind is threatening to do that the angels are preventing it from?
There's one other passage is it in Hebrews that talks about the winds that do his bidding or something like that?
Oh yeah, the angels are winds. He makes his angels winds. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. But what in this context here, as he sees the four angels standing at the four corners, holding back the four winds, so that no wind might blow on the earth or sea or against any tree. What are they doing here? What's the meaning?
Waiting.
They're trying to protect the 144,000 before they are sealed.
Yes, it's holding back the judgment right now until a certain task has been completed. So they're not stopping the wind like Jesus did, where he said, "Peace, be still," and it died away. They are just holding it back until a specific task has been complete, which we're going to see in just a minute what that is. So that wind is this destructive wind of judgment that's about to come upon the world, but not until a task has been done. So let's take a look at that. He then sees in verse 2 another angel ascending from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God. And he called out with a loud voice to the four angels who had been given power to harm the earth and sea, saying, "Don't harm the earth or sea or the trees." So the whole point of the angels is they've been given power to harm the earth and the sea. And they're saying, don't hold off. Don't do that just yet. He ascends, and what does he ascend with? What does he have?
Seals to put on their forehead.
He's got the seal of the living God that he is going to put on the foreheads, the servants of our God on their foreheads. Okay. So I want to talk about, what does that seal mean? The seal of the servants of their foreheads. So we're going to take a look at what a seal on the forehead means. And so we're going to take first look at Exodus 28, 36 to 38. Bob, Thomas, would you get that for us here?
Yep.
See it okay?
Yep.
Right.
You shall make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it, like the engraving of a signet, holy to the Lord. And you shall fasten it on the turban by a cord of blue. It shall be on the front of the turban. It shall be on Aaron's forehead, and Aaron shall bear any guilt from the holy things that the people of Israel consecrate as their holy gifts. It shall regularly be on his forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord.
All right. Who is Aaron?
He was the
Aaron is
first
Brother of
priest.
Moses,
He's
Yeah.
the first priest.
He is the first high priest,
high priest, yeah.
and he is given, in a sense, a seal for his forehead. What does the seal say?
Holy to the Lord.
Holy to the Lord.
Mm,
What does holy to the Lord mean?
Separated to the Lord.
Yeah, separated. He belongs to me. And it's that seal on his forehead that will make him accepted before the Lord.
mm.
So that's the first thing. The sealing on a forehead, the first time we see something like that is Aaron, the high priest. And now John invokes that imagery and saying that you've been noticing that he keeps emphasizing this theme of this priesthood, that we're a kingdom of priests.
Mm.
And so we see it once again where that seal on the forehead is not something he's making up, not something new. It's a sign that these servants are holy to the Lord, They are his high priests. Because what can a high priest do that a regular priest cannot?
One to the Holy of Holies.
Go into the Holy of Holies. Absolutely. Go into the Holy of Holies, the very throne, the very immediate presence of God. Only the high priest can go. He's the one belonging. And so he presents the servants of God on their foreheads. And as likened to Aaron, the high priest who has that privilege to go there and still be acceptable to the Lord. We see another use of this in Ezekiel. Ezekiel 9:4-6. See, sorry, not 67. And let's see, Pam, would you read this for us? Let's see that.
And the Lord said to him, pass through the city, through Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sighed and groaned over all of the abominations that are committed in it. And to the others, he said in my hearing, pass through the city after him and strike. Your eye shall not spare, and you shall show no pity. Kill old men outright, young men and maidens, little children and women, but touch no one on whom is the mark. And begin at my sanctuary. So they began with the elders who were before the house.
Okay, he is, remember Ezekiel, when we were studying that before, has been shown all the abominations happening in Israel and in the temple and in Jerusalem, and judgment has been declared. The Babylonians are about to strike and take them out, but he does something unique in this particular scene where the judgment really falls upon the guilty, and those who were righteous in God's eyes, he has them removed and sent to exile. They do not suffer the way that the others do. And you see this where he orders them to be sealed, to have a mark upon them that will protect them. Who, in this context here, who are the ones that are set apart? He says specifically what makes them qualify for that.
The ones who objected to the abominations.
Yeah, the ones who sighed and groaned over all the abominations.
Right.
And who were not participating in it. Like Lot was like that in Sodom and Gomorrah. It says that righteous Lot, his spirit was in agony over what was happening in Sodom. And the Lord, that was his righteousness, and the Lord delivered him from there because he did not partake of it. Same thing here. So we have this concept of this judgment day coming, but before he does, he seals his people to protect them from the judgment that's going to fall. Where else did you see this happen? Not in a literal seal on the forehead, but in a similar way, where God sets apart a certain group of people from judgment. Do you remember?
The blood on the lamp, on the posts and that for the
Passover.
in Egypt.
Passover.
Exactly, the Passover lamb. That's what that was about. A seal on their doorposts so that would protect them from the judgment to come. There's another time it happens too after that. It happens during the time of Joshua, where someone was sealed and protected from judgment.
Oh, Rahab,
Rahab,
Yeah, Rahab. If you remember, and remember what they did as a sign?
The red
tie.
string,
Red,
red
Yeah.
cord.
cord down the window.
A red cord down the window is what protected her from, and her family from judgment. The same, symbolizing the blood of the lamb, that she would be under that protection. We're seeing the same passages here now with why Christ is presented not just as the lion, but as the lamb whose blood seals us and protects us from the wrath to come. So coming back, but the question really is who are the 144,000? What is that about? You talk to a Jehovah's Witness, I think it is. And they say there's 144,000 who get to go to heaven.
Right.
Everyone else who's a believer, or at least a JW, can be on earth and enjoy the paradise, but then there's a special 144,000 who
Right.
get elevated status, right? I'm not seeing it here. I don't know what they're talking about. But let's talk about the 144,000. First question is this. Do you think the number 144,000 has any special meaning?
It means a lot.
12 times 12.
It's 12 times 12, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
And 12 times 12 times 1,000. You'll notice the number 12 comes up an awful lot here, doesn't it?
Mhm.
What's the meaning of 12?
Tribes of
Well,
Judah,
Tribes?
12
Tribes.
tribes.
Judah.
God's people.
These are God's people. 12 is the number of God's people, those who are belong to the Lord. We have 12 disciples. We have the 12 tribes. When he measures, the number 144 is going to come up again in Revelation 21.
Mm.
18 to 18, we see it again, the number 144 and the number 12,000.
Mm.
And let's take a look at that here. Teresa, can you see that okay?
Yes,
Would you read that for us?
and the one who spoke with me had a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and walls. The city lives foursquare, its length the same as its width. And he measured the city with his rod, 12,000 stadia. Its length and width are equal. He also measured its walls, 144 cubits by human measurement, which is also an angel's measurement. The wall was built of jasper, while the city was pure gold, like clear glass.
Mhm.
This is Revelation 21, and I'll show you the full chapter so you can see it in its fullness. What measures 12,000? The length, the width, the height, and they're all equal. It's a perfect cube, by the way.
Mm.
What measures 12,000?
The new heaven, new earth,
This is the New Jerusalem. This is the city of God,
Mm.
where God's people dwell, and its measurements of 144 cubits, its wall. These are all very significant measurements here, and it's presented. You know why it's the shape of a cube? Remember that? I think we talked about that before.
The Holy of Holies.
Yeah, the Holy of Holies in the temple was a perfect cube. So this is the throne of God. I mean, it's 12,000 stadia is enormous. That's over 1,300 miles. So the New Jerusalem, if we're to take it literally, is 1,300 miles wide and long and high. But of course, we're not taking it literally. It just means it's a big place, and it encompasses all of God's people are there. So when you read in Revelation 7, you're not reading this literally as far as 144,000 is going to be literally 144,000. It's symbolic, and I'll prove it to you here for a second. He hears the number, and it's 144,000, right?
Yeah.
And then he's going to look in the next section. And what is he going to see when he looks?
a great multitude,
A great multitude.
That no one could number.
No one could number. And where are they from?
Every
Every
nation.
Every nation.
People and language.
So this is not, that 144,000 is not talking about 144,000 Jews. First off, that doesn't make any sense of the text whatsoever, because the Jews are from Judah, and this is referring to all different tribes. But then more to the point, John hears the number, but when he looks to see who that number is referring to, he doesn't see these literal descendants of Jacob. He sees people from every tribe and nation. And now I want to look at this list here.
Just a quick question. I see them all as Jews. You say just Judah?
Judah is the only Judah and maybe Benjamin are considered Jews because they come from the nation of Judah. The other tribes were all lost. They became Samaritans. They lost their identity. So when we talk about the Jewish people, we're not talking about the 12 tribes. We're really only talking about a couple of tribes. That's why they're called Jews. They're from Judah, if that makes sense. So I want to take a look at this list here, because this is a fascinating list. It's set up as a census. And the first thing you'll note is that in the, there are censuses taken. Do you know why they would take a census of the people?
Taxes.
Say that one more time. For taxes, that's why the Romans did it, absolutely. In Moses' time, they had a different reason for taking a census in the book of Numbers.
Figure out
Is it
how,
the military
military
army?
Military, yep. You know, you don't go to war unless you know that you've got the troops. And I'm gonna stop my share for a second here so I can pull up my other screen. The census, the purpose of the census is preparation for war. And so you're numbering really the men who are of war age. You're not giving the full number of the people, just to those who are of fighting age, and they prepare for battle. So Moses takes a census as they're about to enter the promised land for the first time, but then they fail, if you remember. So they stay in the land until they all die off, and then they're about to enter the second time 40 years later, and he takes another census. That's why it's called the Book of Numbers. It's surrounding the numbers of the people.
Wasn't one of David's sins taking a census?
Right,
Yes. Do you know
Yeah.
why that was a sin?
because
Because
he
he wasn't
wasn't,
relying on God?
Yeah, but there's that too. Diane, you gonna say something?
oh, I was just gonna say, it went against God's will. You know,
Yeah,
and he wasn't
what-
asked to do that. He did it on his own out of pride.
yeah. You take a census as you're about to go to holy war. And when at David's time, the holy wars are over. It's not a time to conquer new territory. You've received the land that God has promised you. And David, for whatever reason, maybe oftentimes kings go to war when they feel vulnerable. It's a nice way to rally the people, to get them together. That's why these communist countries are always going to war, because it just distracts the people from other things. Who knows? But it was a great evil in God's eyes, because he wasn't just counting the numbers. There is a level of preparation for something which he shouldn't be doing. This is why even Joab, his commander, says, don't do this evil thing. It's not just about seeing how many folks we got. But the census is different than your other censuses. And I want to take a look at that. Here's the census that was taken by Moses in Numbers 1:20 to 43. They list out in order all the tribes and the numbers of people there. Now, I want you to take note here. Look at it carefully. Can you see some things that are a little bit strange about John's census in Revelation?
Well, in
When you
in
compare it to
Israel,
Moses.
the sons of Israel, there is, let's see, in the sons of Israel, you don't see Ephraim or Manasseh. And in the census itself, you don't see Dan, Levi, or Joseph.
Okay, so between the sons of Israel and the census of Noah, of Moses, Ephraim and Manasseh here take the place of Joseph, if you remember that.
Mhm.
And there's also one of the sons of Israel is missing in the census that Moses took. Which one was that?
Levi.
Levi, because the priests don't have territory. They don't fight in the wars here. So they're set apart. So Levi and Joseph are the two sons who are not listed in the census. Joseph, because he gets a double portion. So Ephraim and Manasseh, his two sons, take his place. And Levi, because he's a priest, does not get territory. That's why Joseph's two sons take him out of the picture here. All right, so that's some of the difference between these two. But now look at the census of Moses and compare it to the census of John. Just look at those two columns here. What's the first thing you see that's different?
Judah's first.
Judah is first. Okay. You'll notice Reuben is listed first in both the sons and the census. Why is Reuben always first?
He was the firstborn.
He is the firstborn, right? But in John's census, he makes a special point to put Judah first. Okay. Why might he do that?
Reuben
Christ
lost
came from the line of Judah.
Christ came from the line of Judah. And what has John just heard? The Lion of the tribe of
Right.
Judah has conquered, right?
Right.
So John presents this army, and it's an army being led not by Reuben. It's an army being led by Christ himself, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So we begin there. But then you may notice some other things that are a little bit odd about this. We'll talk first about maybe, how about a name there that shouldn't be there, but is?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Yes. There he is.
And how about another name that shouldn't be there?
Well, the census
Levi.
Levi's in there.
Levi is in there. Well, that's
Mhm.
so John and his thing puts Levi and Joseph in there.
Mm.
Now Joseph is going to take the place of Ephraim, which is, in a sense, Ephraim took his place, but he's going to put Joseph back in. And
Mm.
then you've got Levi, who's going to be put back in as part of this. All right. Significance of that. Why would John, we'll start with Levi. Why would he put Levi in there?
You're going to need priests.
Exactly right. This is exactly right. He keeps emphasizing we are priests. Those sealed, he describes them as descendants of like being sealed like Aaron was sealed. We are priests, and this is a royal army of kings, of priests. And he throws them in there to really emphasize that point to us.
Mm.
Anybody reading that census would say, whoa, what in the world is Levi doing in there? But then other questions, why do you think he puts Joseph in there? Joseph was not a tribe. Joseph was a son of Israel, but he was not a tribe. But why does he put Joseph's name in there?
Well, does it because he takes both Joseph's sons and groups them together, and this keeps it, the number as 12?
It does, but he could have just put Ephraim in there too. That's how he's listed there. He puts Joseph back in, replacing Ephraim.
Is it because he was instrumental in saving Israel?
Yeah, let's talk about what made Joseph so special. What's his story?
Rachel was the mother of Joseph and Benjamin.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, and that was his wife.
Rachel was Jacob's wife, correct.
Good.
But what
But without Joseph, there were no Jews. There were no Israelites.
he did, he saved them in time
Famine.
of great trouble, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me
During
about
the
Joseph's
famine.
story. What was Joseph's story that is so compelling that Moses in the book of Genesis, most stories he spends a chapter or two on, but Joseph's story he spends, I think, 14 chapters on or something like that.
Well, he's seen as a type of Christ, I know that.
He is a type of Christ. What makes him a type of Christ?
He was forgiving. He forgave his brother.
Others, yeah.
Yeah, because what did his brothers do to him, Jack?
Sold
They
them
sold
all
him
into
into slavery.
slavery.
They
Yeah.
sold him off.
He was betrayed. He was slandered.
He
Suffer.
saved God, in a sense, he saved God's people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Suffered.
Stayed humble.
Imprisoned, right?
He always
That
did
whole
what
thing
was
that happened
right.
to Joseph is really the first. I mean, his story is so compelling because he is presented as a righteous son of his father who suffers such abuse and slander every turn, not just from his brothers, but from Potiphar's wife. You remember
Mhm.
that?
Right, yeah.
And he's imprisoned and he's persecuted for righteousness' sake. But then risen to glory to save his family. Really, actually more than his family, he saved the world.
Yeah.
And so I think personally, I think as John is writing this, Joseph is a character that we can really identify with here as we reflect upon Christ's story and then the story of the church, the persecuted, the despised, the slandered. Joseph is such a character for us. and how God exalted him to the highest place as he will his people. So those are a few things, but now something is still off here. Who is not in this list that should have been?
And
Dan. And there's also Ephraim, who Joseph takes the place of. Okay. But in particular, Dan. Why is Dan missing? Any thoughts on that?
See, from the northern tribe, that,
He was, let me see, let me get a map.
Judges 18. The early association of the tribe of Dan with idolatry.
hmm,
They explain its omission from this list.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of questions about why Dan is being left out. One is he was this apostate tribe, and I'll show you a few things that suggest perhaps why John does not put him in there. One is when Jacob blesses his sons, he gives Dan a strange blessing. If we can see the here, 16, this is 49, 16 to 18. John, can you see that okay and read it?
Yep. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider falls backwards.
Okay.
is that reference to Christ being crucified?
Could be. I mean, the whole thing of it's a strange blessing in a sense, but Judah is compared to a lion, but Dan is compared to what?
serpent.
Serpent, a viper on the path. Last I recall, I don't think that's a good thing, is it?
No,
No.
first.
It's cursed, right?
Yeah.
And there's a sense this he kind of pauses. I wait for your salvation, O Lord, perhaps reflecting upon the depravity of his own sons, and particularly this tribe of Dan, of what it will become. And I wait for your salvation, O Lord, that you would come forward. Now, it's interesting you mentioned, is it a reference to Christ? Possibly too, because Christ, remember, says, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man will be lifted up. That the serpent becomes this sign of not only of that which is cursed, but also that which, when lifted up, is cursed for us, so that we can be blessed. So it's a mix. But Dan is described, he's the only one who's given this kind of a horrible analogy. And then we see that in, you're right, in, was it Judges 18? That's the one? We have the Danites, this whole tribe that goes after idolatry. They take a Levite and they basically create the whole house is in rebellion, and they they go apostate. They're the apostate tribe. As far as the location of Dan, let me see if I can pull up a map here with where it is. Tribes of Israel map. And let's just see where Dan is.
There was a city up north, but I thought the tribe was down around Jerusalem.
Yeah, you're right. There is a city up north.
There he is, next to Ephraim.
Damascus.
Let me see if I got it here. Can anyone see that?
Yeah.
All right, so
Oh, Dan's
Dan's
up
right there.
north.
And
Near
near
Joppa.
Joppa, yeah.
so Dan and Ephraim are very close together. That's interesting too.
Right, yeah.
And Ephraim did kind of they became the leading ones of Israel, who were the apostates.
Yeah.
They, when you look at the history of Judah and Israel, Judah was up and down. They had kings that were faithful and then
Right.
kings that were terrible, but Israel, they never had good. It was always bad, one after another. And Dan and Ephraim were kind of the leading figures there in the center of it all. And you would really feel it. You can see why they would call it Ephraim, because Judah's interaction would be mostly with these tribes here. It would not be with most of their tensions and so forth like that would be over here. But there is a mention of Dan way up here too, as a city.
Right.
So,
Good.
and I don't think that was a good place either. But in any case, so when John this is the symbolism of Revelation, where John, as he's laying out this list, is not going for a literal group here, but there's symbolism in the way that he's ordered this. And I also want to show you one more thing about this list. I should have, I got to keep, this is hard to switch between my document and my Google here. So let me find the notes one more time. So one more thing about the list I want to show you. And that's a little bit about the order of the list. There's another surprise in the order of the list. You'll notice in the sons of Israel, in Genesis 35, they're listed out first by Leah's sons, then by Rachel, then by Bilhah and Zilpah. Why do they think they did it that way? Why are Leah and Rachel's sons mentioned first?
Because they were legitimate.
Mhm.
Wives.
The others weren't.
Yes, those wives were they were the true wives of Jacob. Who is Bilhah and Zilpah?
Slaves, servants.
They were
Servants.
servants. They were
Were
slaves,
they?
right?
Slaves are servants.
Slaves.
So
Concubines, yeah.
Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher are slaves, which is why on this list you'll see them at the bottom. Why, when we list out the list here, it's interesting. Now Gad gets a little bit of a high precedent, but Asher and Naphtali are still way at the bottom here.
Mhm.
But when John lists it out, how does he list them?
Further
Well,
up.
Gad, Asher, and Naphtali, after Judah and Reuben are given top spots.
Hmm.
What do you think he's trying to say?
God's people exist everywhere, even amongst the
Yeah.
less than honorable.
Yes. Yeah. Right. The greatest shall be the least shall be the greatest. There's a sense of that the slaves become sons. I mean, this is so much of the gospel and the whole thing. That's why leading into the next scene of, we're not talking about bloodlines here. This is an army of faith. And so there's some strange aspects of it that emphasize this is an army of kings led by the line of the tribe of Judah. It's an army of priests, Levi's included. It's those who have suffered and have been imprisoned, but vindicated by the Lord. And it's also an army of those who are the lowest, who have been raised to status here through Christ. A lot going on in this little census here.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's why I encourage you, there's so much more here when you read it as John intends us to read it, understanding the references and not push it as a literal display of there's going to be 12,000 people from Judah and then 12,000 from Reuben. I don't even know where these people are. The Reubenites, the Gadites, the Ashers. We have no clue who these people are or where they would be. That's not the point of it. And John makes that point clear when he tells us he looks and beholds and he sees what this really is. So, all right, we'll break it there for now, I think. Any questions about that? I hope that was clear.
Yeah, very good.
That's very good.
Great.
I didn't notice those things before. Thank you for that comparison.
All right. Absolutely.
Yes.
So,
So this is just a little trivial note. I was just looking it up, and apparently Jeroboam, who was the first king of the 10 tribes of Israel, was from the tribe of Ephraim.
is he? Yeah. Yeah. Ephraim was, again, leading part of those apostate. And it's interesting, there's a sense of you have the 12 tribes of Israel, and John takes one out and has him replaced. We see that it's similar to the 12 apostles, where one apostle is taken out
There you go.
and
Yeah.
replaced, you know, and you see that kind of pattern of one apostate who is replaced. So this tribe here, so John's census is really, this is an army of faith. This is not an army of bloodlines, and we're in there. We're included in this.
Mhm.
And so the idea is that the angels hold back the judgments of God until all of his people, every last one of them, has been sealed and is not going to go through what is about to come to them. So that's good news for us, I think. So,
Yes.
so.
What does apostate mean?
Apostate is someone who falls away, who become either through betrayal or false teaching, or just someone who basically becomes an enemy of the faith, sort of who was one and then falls away. That would be like an apostate. So,
Thank
all right, great. Well, good to see everybody.
Good to see
And,
Thank you.
yeah,
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.